The sound of my father's laughter still echoes in my mind. It wasn't a friendly chuckle or even a nervous giggle. It was the kind of laugh that cuts through your soul and leaves scars. A business consultant at 27? Specter, please stop embarrassing yourself, he said while cutting his steak. The entire dining room at my family's house in Phoenix fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate. My older brother, Harold, smirked from across the table. Maybe when you're done playing pretend, I can get you an interview at my insurance company, Harold added, stabbing his green beans. The filing department is always looking for help. The table erupted in laughter. My sister Megan giggled so hard she nearly choked on her wine. Even my quiet Uncle Noah couldn't hide his grin. I sat there, my cheeks burning with shame, my hands gripping my fork so tight my knuckles turned white. I had just told them about landing my first paying client for my business consulting firm. A local restaurant wanted help with their marketing strategy. It was a $3,000 contract, and I was proud. But to them, it was a joke. Another one of Specter's silly dreams. I forced a smile and changed the subject. But inside, something dark and determined was growing. That night would change everything between us forever. Growing up as the middle child in the Morrison family meant being invisible. Harold was the golden boy, the successful insurance agent with the corner office and expensive suits. Megan was the baby, the spoiled princess who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was just Specter, the dreamer who couldn't figure out his life. Family gatherings were torture sessions disguised as celebrations. Harold would talk about his latest sales records while everyone nodded with approval. Megan would share stories about her teaching job and how much her students loved her. When it was my turn to speak, the conversation would somehow shift to someone else. Specter's still finding himself, my mother would say with a forced smile when relatives asked about me. My father would just shake his head and change the topic to Harold's promotion or Megan's latest achievement. I stopped trying to share my accomplishments after a while. What was the point? When I graduated with my business degree, nobody came to the ceremony. They were too busy planning Megan's birthday party. When I got my first job at a marketing agency, my father asked if it paid well enough to move out of their basement. Everything I did was met with skepticism or complete indifference. I learned to keep my dreams to myself, but that didn't make them disappear. They just grew stronger in the silence. Walking home from that disastrous dinner, the cool Arizona desert air did nothing to cool my burning rage. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Carlos. How did it go? I couldn't even respond. How do you explain that your own family treated your success like a punchline? I sat on a park bench under a streetlight and opened my notes app. My fingers trembled as I typed what would become my business manifesto. They think this is a game. They think I'm playing dress up with my dreams. Tonight, they laughed at my $3,000 client. In 2 years, they'll beg me for jobs. In 5 years, they'll work for me. And when that day comes, I'll remember every single laugh, every dismissive comment, every time they made me feel worthless. This isn't about proving them wrong anymore. This is about making them pay for never believing in me. I read it 3 times before saving it. The words felt like fire in my chest, but also like fuel. I had spent years seeking their approval, their recognition, their love. Now I realized I didn't need any of those things. I needed revenge. I needed to become so successful that they couldn't ignore me anymore. And when they finally saw what I had built, it would be too late for them to claim any part of it. My studio apartment became my headquarters. I pushed my kitchen table against the wall and covered it with notebooks, printed articles, and my laptop. The walls were soon covered with whiteboards tracking potential clients, revenue goals, and marketing strategies. I invested my savings in business courses, marketing software, and a professional website. While my family slept comfortably in their suburban homes, I worked until 3 in the morning. My refrigerator was stocked with energy drinks and microwave meals. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every spare moment was spent learning, planning, and executing. I studied successful consulting firms, analyzed their strategies, and figured out how to do it better. I reached out to small businesses in Phoenix, offering free consultations to build my reputation. Most ignored me, but a few were desperate enough to give me a chance. I treated every small victory like a stepping stone towards something bigger. My family had no idea what I was building in that cramped apartment. They thought I was still playing computer and wasting time with my silly dreams. They were too busy with their comfortable lives to notice that I had stopped asking for their approval. I had found something much more powerful than their acceptance. I had found my purpose, and it was going to destroy their comfortable little world. Balancing my day job at the marketing agency with building my consulting firm was like living two different lives. During the day, I was Specter the employee, taking orders and following someone else's vision. But at night, I became Specter the entrepreneur, the one who would make his own rules. I worked 60-hour weeks without complaint. My boss, Mr. Patterson, noticed my dedication but assumed I was just trying to impress him for a promotion. He had no idea I was using every project, every client interaction, every strategy meeting as training for my own business. While my coworkers went out for drinks after work, I went home to my war room. While they spent weekends relaxing, I spent them cold calling potential clients and refining my pitch. My social life vanished completely. My college friends stopped inviting me to parties because I always declined. My family assumed I was just being antisocial, but I was being strategic. Every sacrifice was an investment in my future revenge. Meanwhile, family dinners continued without me. Harold bought a new house. Megan got engaged to her longtime boyfriend. My parents bragged about both of them to anyone who would listen. When relatives asked about me, the answer was always the same. Specter's still trying to figure things out. Perfect. Let them think I was lost while I was actually finding my way to their destruction. My first major breakthrough came 6 months after that humiliating dinner. A mid-sized tech startup hired me to overhaul their entire marketing strategy for $15,000. It was more money than I had ever made on a single project, and I was proud. But when I mentioned it at my cousin's wedding, the response was predictably dismissive. "That's nice, Specter," my mother said, barely looking up from her conversation with my aunt. "Your brother just got promoted to district manager. His salary increased by $30,000. Harold grinned and adjusted his tie. "Different leagues, little brother. When you're ready for a real career, let me know. I might be able to get you started in our mailroom." The wedding guests around us chuckled politely. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was calculating. Harold made about $85,000 a year in his management position. My consulting firm was on track to make $120,000 in its first year, but I wasn't ready to reveal that information yet. Let them think I was still struggling. Let them believe their own lies about my failures. Meanwhile, I was building something they couldn't comprehend. By the time I left the wedding, I had already decided to miss the next family gathering. I had better things to do than listen to their backhanded compliments and passive-aggressive advice. My business was growing, and their opinions were becoming irrelevant. 8 months after starting my consulting firm, I walked into Mr. Patterson's office and handed him my resignation letter. His face went through several expressions before settling on confusion. "You're quitting? Specter, you're one of our most reliable employees. Where are you going?" When I told him I was starting my own consulting business, his confusion turned to amusement. "Listen, son, I've been in this industry for 20 years. Consulting is a tough game. Most people who try to go solo end up crawling back within 6 months. He leaned back in his chair with the same condescending smile I had seen 1,000 times from my family. "Tell you what, I'll keep your position open for 3 months. When reality hits, you can come back with no hard feelings." I shook his hand and thanked him for the opportunity, but inside I was laughing. Mr. Patterson, like my family, couldn't see past his own limited vision. He thought success only came through traditional paths, safe choices, and playing by other people's rules. He had no idea that I had already replaced my agency's salary with consulting income. He didn't know that I had a waiting list of clients or that I was turning down projects because I was booked solid. Walking out of that office felt like escaping prison. For the first time in my adult life, I answered nobody but myself. The freedom was intoxicating, but the real high came from knowing that everyone who had doubted me was about to be proven very, very wrong. My second year in business exploded beyond my wildest expectations. A Fortune 500 company hired Phoenix Strategic Consulting to overhaul their entire customer acquisition process for $85,000. It was my largest contract yet, and it opened doors I didn't even know existed. Word spread through Phoenix's business community about the young consultant who was getting results where established firms had failed. My client list grew to include restaurants, tech startups, real estate companies, and manufacturing businesses. I was working with companies that had annual revenues in the millions, helping them solve problems that their expensive corporate consultants couldn't handle. The money was flowing faster than I could spend it. I moved from my studio apartment to a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the entire city. I bought my first luxury car, a BMW that cost more than Harold made in 6 months. But I was careful to keep my success hidden from my family. When they asked about my business, I gave vague answers about doing okay and building slowly. I wanted them to discover my success on their own terms, in their own time, when the revelation would hurt them most. Meanwhile, I started tracking their careers with the same precision I used to track my business metrics. Harold's insurance company was struggling with new competition from online providers. The industry was changing, and traditional agents like him were becoming obsolete. Perfect timing for what I had planned. While building my empire, I became fascinated by my family's professional vulnerabilities. Harold worked for Pinnacle Insurance, a traditional company that was hemorrhaging clients to digital-first competitors. I used my business intelligence tools to track their quarterly reports, client retention rates, and market position. The data painted a clear picture. Pinnacle was dying, and Harold didn't even know it. Megan taught at Roosevelt Elementary, a public school in an underfunded district that was facing budget cuts. Her job security depended on seniority and politics, two things that could change overnight. My parents were approaching retirement with minimal savings and a mortgage they couldn't afford on a fixed income. They were all vulnerable in different ways, and I was building something that could exploit every weakness. But I wasn't ready to make my move yet. I was still hungry for more success, more proof of their stupidity, more ammunition for the war I was planning. I started attending Phoenix Chamber of Commerce events, networking with the city's power players, and building relationships with people who could influence my family's futures. Every handshake was strategic. Every conversation was calculated. I was playing a long game that they couldn't even see, let alone understand. And when the time came to strike, I would have all the weapons I needed to destroy their comfortable little world completely. The shift began subtly. Harold started viewing my LinkedIn profile regularly, spending 20 or 30 minutes browsing my company page and reading about my recent client wins. I could see every view, every click, every moment he spent studying my success. At first, I thought he was just curious, but the frequency suggested something else: concern. His insurance company had announced layoffs, and Harold was smart enough to recognize that his industry was changing. He was probably wondering if his little brother might actually know something about business after all. The irony was delicious. For years, he had dismissed my dreams and mocked my ambitions. Now he was secretly researching my company, trying to understand how I had built something successful while he was facing an uncertain future. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't acknowledge his interest. I just watched and waited, knowing that eventually his pride would crack and he would be forced to swallow his words. My LinkedIn connections started receiving notifications that Harold Morrison had viewed their profiles too. He was expanding his network, probably preparing for the job search he was too proud to admit he needed. Meanwhile, my company was featured in Phoenix Business Journal as one of the city's fastest-growing consulting firms. The article included a photo of me in my downtown office, looking confident and successful. I wondered if Harold saw that article, and if he did, what he thought about his little brother's silly dreams now. Christmas dinner that year was a different kind of performance. I arrived at my parents' house in my BMW, wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than Harold's monthly car payment. My family noticed the changes immediately, but tried to play it cool. "You look good, Specter," my mother said, though her eyes lingered on my expensive watch. Business must be picking up. I kept my responses vague but confident. "Things are going well. Can't complain." Harold was unusually quiet during dinner. He kept glancing at me with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked like respect. When my father asked about my consulting thing, I gave a brief overview of my services without mentioning specific clients or revenue numbers. Helping businesses optimize their operations and increase profitability, I said simply. There's a lot of demand for that kind of expertise. The conversation felt different this time. Instead of dismissive laughter, there were follow-up questions. Instead of condescending advice, there was genuine interest. Megan asked if I worked with any companies she might have heard of. My Uncle Noah wondered if I had any advice for his struggling plumbing business. Even my father seemed impressed when I mentioned working with several Fortune 500 companies. But I could see the wheels turning in Harold's head. He was doing the math, calculating how much money I must be making to afford my obvious lifestyle upgrade. The golden boy was starting to realize that his little brother might not be such a failure after all. The validation I had been waiting for came in the form of a Forbes article titled, "Rising Stars: Young Entrepreneurs Disrupting Traditional Industries." Phoenix Strategic Consulting was featured as a case study in agile business development, and my photo appeared alongside other successful entrepreneurs under 30. The article described me as a visionary who understood market disruption before established players recognized the threat. It mentioned my client roster, my innovative approaches, and my company's impressive growth trajectory. I didn't share the article with my family. I didn't post it on social media or send it to anyone. I just waited. Sure enough, my phone rang 2 days later. It was my father, and his voice had a tone I had never heard before. "Specter, your mother and I saw an interesting article online about your company. Is it accurate?" I confirmed that everything in the article was true. Phoenix Strategic Consulting had grown from a one-man operation in my studio apartment to a team of 12 consultants with offices in Phoenix and Tucson. We were on track to generate over $2 million in revenue that year. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought he had hung up. "Well," he finally said, his voice smaller than usual, "we'd love to hear more about what you're doing. Maybe you could come to dinner this Sunday and tell us about your business." The invitation felt surreal. My parents actually wanted to hear about my work. After years of dismissal and indifference, they were finally paying attention. But their interest felt hollow, motivated by my success rather than genuine pride in their son. Sunday dinner was unlike any family gathering I had experienced. Suddenly, I was the center of attention. My mother asked detailed questions about my business model. My father nodded approvingly at my revenue figures. Megan seemed genuinely impressed by my client list. But it was Harold's behavior that revealed the most. "So you're hiring people now?" he asked, trying to sound casual while cutting his roast beef. "We have 12 consultants and support staff," I confirmed. "Good talent is hard to find, but we're growing fast. I'm actually looking to expand into new markets next year." Harold leaned forward, abandoning any pretense of casual interest. "I've been thinking about making a change myself. Insurance isn't what it used to be. The whole industry is being disrupted by technology." He paused, clearly rehearsing his next words. "Maybe we could talk about opportunities at your company. I have a lot of business experience that might be valuable." The room went completely silent. Everyone stared at Harold, then at me, waiting for my response. This was the moment I had fantasized about during those long nights in my studio apartment. My successful older brother, who had laughed at my dreams and offered me a job in his mailroom, was now asking for my help. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. "Send me your resume," I said evenly. "We'll see if there's a fit." Harold's resume arrived in my inbox the next morning with a note that revealed his desperation. "Really excited about the possibility of working together. The insurance industry is changing rapidly, and I think your company represents the future of business consulting. I'd love to contribute to Phoenix Strategic's continued success." Reading between the lines, I could see his fear. Pinnacle Insurance was downsizing, and Harold was probably on the chopping block. He needed an exit strategy, and I was his only realistic option. I forwarded his resume to my HR director, Casey, with a simple note. "Treat this like any other application. No special consideration because he's family." Casey scheduled Harold for the standard interview process: a phone screening, a technical assessment, and an in-person interview with our leadership team. I deliberately removed myself from the process to avoid any appearance of favoritism. 3 days later, Casey knocked on my office door with a concerned expression. We completed Harold Morrison's interviews. He's intelligent and well-spoken, but he's not a good fit for our culture. He seems to expect special treatment and mentioned several times that you and he could run things together once he learned our systems. He also doesn't have the digital marketing skills or analytical thinking that our clients expect. I wasn't surprised. Harold had succeeded in a traditional industry through relationships and personality, but those skills wouldn't translate to the data-driven, results-focused world of modern business consulting. "What's your recommendation?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Pass," Casey said without hesitation. "He'd be a cultural disruption and wouldn't add value to our team." Calling Harold to deliver the rejection was one of the most satisfying moments of my business career. His shock was audible through the phone. "But I'm your brother," he sputtered, as if DNA was a qualification for employment. "After everything our family has done for you over the years, I thought you'd want to help me out." That phrase triggered something cold and calculating in my brain. "What exactly has our family done for me, Harold?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed contained years of dismissal, mockery, and condescension. "I need this, Specter," he finally admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Pinnacle is downsizing next month. I'm going to be laid off." For a moment, I was tempted to let him suffer completely. I could hang up and watch him struggle to find another job in a dying industry. But that would be too easy, too quick. I had a better plan. "I can't hire you as a consultant," I said firmly. "You don't have the qualifications for that level of position. But we do need someone to manage client relations for our new small business division. It's entry-level for our company, but it would use your sales background. The salary would be about half what you're making now." The silence stretched so long I thought he had hung up. "You want me to take a step backward?" he asked, his pride audibly wounded. "I want to offer you a job based on your actual qualifications for our needs," I replied. Not because we shared DNA. After another long pause, he accepted. The golden boy would be working for his little brother, starting at the bottom, earning half his previous salary. Harold's first day at Phoenix Strategic Consulting was a masterpiece of psychological warfare disguised as corporate onboarding. I assigned him to report to Marcus Chun, our 26-year-old client relations manager who had started as an intern 2 years earlier. Marcus was brilliant, hardworking, and completely unimpressed by Harold's previous title or family connection. "Your brother seems to think he should be managing accounts immediately," Marcus told me after Harold's first week. "He keeps suggesting process improvements and questioning our systems. Yesterday he asked when he would get his own office." I wasn't surprised. Harold had spent 15 years being the boss, making decisions, and having people defer to his authority. Now he was a junior employee in a cubicle, taking orders from someone young enough to be his kid brother. The adjustment was clearly painful. At family dinners, the dynamic had completely shifted. Harold rarely spoke about work anymore. When relatives asked about his new job, he gave vague answers about learning the digital consulting space and gaining experience in a growth industry. Nobody mentioned that he was working for me, but everyone knew. The whispers followed him everywhere. "Did you hear Harold works for Specter now?" His pride was being systematically destroyed, one day at a time, one small humiliation after another. And the beautiful part was that he had to endure it all with a smile, because I was literally his lifeline in a changing economy. My father's attempt to rewrite history was almost comical. He called me on a Tuesday morning, his voice full of artificial enthusiasm. "Specter, I've been thinking about your company's growth trajectory. You know, I always saw the entrepreneur in you, even when you were young. I remember telling your mother that you had that special spark that couldn't be taught in schools." I let him talk, marveling at his ability to completely fabricate memories. This was the same man who had laughed at my business dreams and suggested I get a real job, like my brother. "I've got some capital I'd like to invest," he continued. "Maybe $50,000 to start. I think Phoenix Strategic Consulting has the potential to really explode, and I want to be part of that success." His offer was transparent in its desperation. My parents were approaching retirement with insufficient savings and a mortgage they couldn't afford on Social Security. They needed their son's success to fund their golden years. "We're not taking outside investors right now," I replied smoothly. "The company is self-funded and profitable. We don't need external capital." The disappointment in his voice was palpable. "But I'm not an outside investor. I'm your father. I've always believed in you." The lie hung in the air between us like smoke. I had recordings on my phone of him mocking my business plans, calling them childish fantasies, and suggesting I focus on finding a stable job. But I didn't challenge his revisionist history. Instead, I simply said, "I'll keep that in mind if our funding situation changes." We both knew it never would. Megan's downfall was swift and predictable. The Roosevelt elementary budget crisis had been building for months, and when the layoffs came, her lack of seniority made her an easy target. She called me on a Friday afternoon, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "They're letting me go at the end of the school year. 10 years of teaching, and they're just throwing me away because I don't have political connections." I made appropriate sympathetic noises while calculating her desperation level. Megan had always been the family princess, protected from real-world consequences by my parents' financial support and her stable government job. Now she was facing unemployment in a competitive market with bills to pay and pride to swallow. "I was thinking," she said between sobs, "maybe you need someone to handle communications for your company? I'm good with people, and I understand education markets. Maybe there's a way I could help Phoenix Strategic while I look for another teaching position." The request was pathetic in its transparency, but also perfectly timed for my purposes. I had been planning to expand into educational consulting anyway, helping schools and districts optimize their operations and improve their efficiency. Megan's teaching background could actually be useful, but not in the way she imagined. "Send me your resume," I said, echoing the same words I had used with Harold. "I'll see what positions might be available." The princess would soon learn what it felt like to beg for scraps from her little brother's table. The family scramble became a source of endless entertainment. Suddenly, relatives who had ignored me for years were reaching out with business propositions and investment opportunities. My Uncle Noah called about marketing help for his plumbing company. My cousin Derek wanted advice on starting an e-commerce business. Even my grandmother asked if I could help her friend's restaurant with their social media presence. Everyone had suddenly discovered that Specter might actually know something about business after all. The most pathetic approach came from my Aunt Patricia, who had always treated me like a family disappointment. She sent a formal business proposal via email, requesting consulting services for her real estate business at family discount rates. The proposal was professionally formatted but desperately amateur in its content, clearly copied from templates she had found online. I responded to most of these requests with polite deferrals. "My calendar is fully booked through next quarter, but I'll keep your needs in mind." The message was clear. I was too important and too busy for their small-time problems. Meanwhile, Harold was thriving in his new role despite his initial resistance. He had learned to follow Marcus's leadership and was actually contributing valuable insights to our client relations processes. But I never let him forget his position in the hierarchy. Every success was acknowledged with measured praise. Every mistake was corrected with professional precision. The golden boy had become just another employee, grateful for his paycheck and terrified of disappointing his younger brother. The ultimate family dinner happened on my 30th birthday. For the first time in my adult life, the entire extended family gathered specifically to celebrate my success. The dining room was decorated with congratulatory banners, and my mother had prepared my favorite meal. Everyone wanted to hear stories about my business, my famous clients, and my plans for expansion. I sat at the head of the table, exactly where my father used to sit during family meetings, and surveyed my conquered kingdom. Harold sat to my right, respectfully quiet and less directly addressed. Megan had joined my company as an educational specialist and was carefully rebuilding her career under my guidance. My parents hung on every word I spoke, desperately hoping for some indication that their retirement security was assured. The conversation flowed around topics I controlled: business strategy, market opportunities, industry trends. I had become the family patriarch at 30, the decision-maker whose approval everyone sought. When it came time for toasts, I stood and raised my glass of expensive wine. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I began, looking around the table at their expectant faces. 5 years ago, you laughed when I said I wanted to start a business. You called it a joke, a fantasy, a waste of time. Tonight, 3 of you work for me. 2 of you have asked me for jobs, and the rest of you want my business advice. The silence was absolute. I built Phoenix Strategic Consulting without your help, without your support, and definitely without your belief. And now that it's successful, suddenly everyone wants to be part of it. I paused for maximum impact. The irony is that your respect means nothing to me anymore. The aftermath of my birthday speech created a permanent shift in our family dynamics. Nobody argued with my assessment because everyone knew it was true. They had dismissed me, mocked me, and ignored me until my success became impossible to deny. Now they were paying the price for their short-sightedness. Harold pulled me aside after dinner and offered what might have been the first genuine apology of his adult life. "I was wrong about you, Specter. I was threatened by your ambition because I was comfortable in my own mediocrity. I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me, and I promise I'll earn your respect through my work, not because we're related." His humility was complete and convincing, but it came too late to matter. The damage had been done during years of condescension and dismissal. I accepted his apology professionally, the way I would accept an apology from any employee who had disappointed me. Megan adapted more quickly to the new family hierarchy. She threw herself into learning digital marketing and educational consulting, determined to prove her value to my company. Her transition from spoiled princess to grateful employee was remarkable, but also irrelevant to my larger satisfaction. My parents continued their desperate attempts to secure financial support for their retirement. They praised every business decision I made, agreed with every opinion I expressed, and constantly hinted about their mounting financial pressures. Their sycophantic behavior was pathetic, but also perfectly appropriate given their complete dependence on my success. I had achieved something more valuable than revenge. I had achieved indifference to their approval. Phoenix Strategic Consulting's third anniversary was marked by our expansion into Denver and Seattle. We now employed 47 people across 3 offices, generating over $8 million in annual revenue. I had built exactly what I promised myself that night after the humiliating family dinner, an empire that my family couldn't ignore. The business press was calling me one of the Southwest's most promising young entrepreneurs. Industry conferences invited me as a keynote speaker. Venture capital firms pitched me on acquisition opportunities that would have made me wealthy beyond my childhood dreams. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was the complete reversal of power within my family structure. Harold had become one of my most valuable employees, managing our small business division with competence and gratitude. Megan was building our educational consulting practice into a profitable specialty. My parents had stopped offering unsolicited advice about my career and started asking for guidance about their own financial decisions. The family members who had once dismissed my ambitions now sought my approval for their own business ventures. I controlled the narrative, set the agenda, and decided who deserved my attention. At family gatherings, conversations revolved around my company's latest achievements, my strategic decisions, and my vision for future growth. I had become exactly what I set out to become: too important to ignore, too successful to dismiss, and too powerful to disrespect. The boy who had been invisible at family dinners was now the only person anyone wanted to talk to. The sweetest moment came during a casual conversation with my father about his retirement planning. He had been hinting for months about his financial insecurity, hoping I would offer to support him and my mother through their golden years. "Specter," he said during one of our monthly dinners, "I've been thinking about our family legacy. Phoenix Strategic Consulting is something we should all be proud of. Maybe there's a way to make it more officially a family business." His suggestion was transparent. He wanted equity in my company, a guaranteed income stream that would solve his retirement crisis. The man who had laughed at my business dreams now wanted to own part of the empire I had built despite his ridicule. "Dad," I said calmly, "Phoenix Strategic has always been a family business in the sense that family members who are qualified and hardworking can find opportunities here. But ownership and control stay with the person who built it from nothing." His disappointment was obvious, but he couldn't argue with my logic. I had invested my own money, taken all the risks, and sacrificed years of my life to build something extraordinary. He had contributed nothing but skepticism and mockery. The idea that he deserved to share in my success simply because we shared DNA was absurd. "Of course," he said quickly. "I just meant that we're all proud of what you've accomplished." Another lie, but one I was willing to let him maintain. His pride was worthless to me, but his acknowledgement of my superiority was priceless. 5 years after that humiliating family dinner, I hosted my own gathering at my new house in Paradise Valley. The sprawling mansion overlooked the entire Phoenix Valley, a symbol of everything I had built while they were busy dismissing my dreams. My family arrived in their modest cars, dressed in their best clothes, trying to look comfortable in surroundings that cost more than they made in several years. I gave them a tour of my home office, where certificates and awards covered the walls. Forbes 30 Under 30, Phoenix Business Journal's Entrepreneur of the Year, Chamber of Commerce Outstanding Achievement Award. Each recognition was a monument to their poor judgment and my vindication. During dinner, served by professional caterers in my formal dining room, I made one final toast. 5 years ago, you told me to get a real job. You laughed at my consulting business and suggested I apply to work in Harold's mailroom. Tonight, you're sitting in a house that a consulting business built, eating food that the consulting business paid for, celebrating the success that the consulting business created. I paused to let the words sink in. Harold, you've become an excellent division manager. Megan, you've built our education practice into something special. Mom and Dad, you've learned to appreciate ambition instead of mocking it. We've all grown. The acknowledgement was gracious but calculated. I was giving them permission to feel good about our current relationship while reminding them exactly how they had failed me when it mattered. The lesson isn't that I was right and you were wrong. I continued. The lesson is that believing in someone's dreams costs nothing, but dismissing them can cost everything. Today, Phoenix Strategic Consulting is valued at over $20 million. We operate in 6 cities, employ over 100 people, and work with some of the most respected companies in America. I've been featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at Harvard Business School, and approached by publishers who want me to write books about entrepreneurial success. But none of those external validations matter as much as the complete transformation of my family's respect and fear. Harold now manages our Southwest division and makes more money working for me than he ever made selling insurance. He's competent, grateful, and completely aware that his comfort depends on my continued approval. Megan has found her calling in educational consulting and frequently tells people that working for her brother saved her career. My parents brag about my success to anyone who will listen, taking credit for raising such an ambitious son while conveniently forgetting their years of dismissive commentary. The most satisfying part isn't their prosperity under my leadership or their desperate attempts to rewrite history. It's my complete indifference to their approval or disapproval. I built my empire to prove them wrong, but I maintained it because I discovered I didn't need them to validate my worth. They called my business a joke. Now they depend on that joke for their financial security, their career success, and their social standing. The little brother they dismissed and mocked has become the patriarch they fear to disappoint. And that transformation, more than any external measure of success, is the sweetest revenge of all.